Welcome back to Crazy Karen HOA. The snow was not the problem. The HOA was. I am standing in my driveway in Bend, Oregon, holding a folding table with 2 thermoses of hot cocoa on it, and Melissa Martinez is screaming at me like I just burned down the clubhouse. "You signed the covenants. Now you live the covenants," she yells, jabbing her finger at the little table. This is an unapproved event setup, and you are creating a liability hazard during a snow emergency. I moved to Silver Slush Court Association 6 months ago for the community event coordinator job at the rec center, thinking I understood how crowds and meetings actually work. I was wrong. This HOA treats winter rules like a religion, and Melissa, the architectural committee chair, is the head priest. The stakes are personal for me because my health has been fragile and sleep disruption is making it worse. Every notice she tapes to my door at midnight wakes me up. Every hearing threat spikes my blood pressure, and now she is standing in the slush at the end of my driveway, with a crossbody bag stuffed with paper packets and a printed storm photo packet in her hands. No readable text visible, but I can see my HOA number circled in red marker. She is a middle-aged white woman with dark brown hair pulled into a ponytail, wearing a purple belted wool coat and a blue knit beanie, and she is angrier than anyone has a right to be over 2 thermoses and a card table. It is a card table, I say. I am shoveling my driveway, and I set out cocoa for the other neighbors who are also shoveling. Melissa shakes her head so hard her ponytail whips across her shoulder. Under Section 14.2 of the Winter Emergency Covenants, all outdoor gatherings require 72-hour notice and committee approval, she says. You did not file a request. You did not get a permit. This is a flagrant violation, and I can fine you daily until the snow melts and you cry. I blink at her. I did not invite anyone, I just put out cocoa. She pulls a folded rule packet in a plastic sleeve out of her bag, no readable text, and waves it at me. The covenants do not distinguish between formal invitations and informal setups, she snaps. The presence of a table constitutes an event. The presence of beverages constitutes hospitality. Hospitality during snow operations is a distraction and a hazard. I can see the magnetic tow authorization placard clipped to her bag. The driver flashes it every time she calls him to threaten a tow. She has used it twice this month already on other neighbors. My car key fob is clenched in my fist because I moved my car out of the driveway an hour ago just to avoid giving her an excuse. The first sign of trouble was 3 weeks ago when I got a winter violation notice that read like a ransom note with a deadline that made no sense. It said my snow stakes were improperly placed and created a visual obstruction during emergency plow operations, and I had 48 hours to remove them or face escalating daily fines starting at $100. I called the management company, and they said Melissa had submitted a complaint with photos, and the board voted to enforce. I did not even know there was a vote. I pulled my stakes and thought that was the end of it. It was not the end of it. A week later, Melissa showed up at my door at 11 at night with a clipboard and a flashlight, claiming she needed to verify compliance. I opened the door in my pajamas and she shined the light in my face and told me I still had not submitted a winter maintenance plan for committee review. I asked what that was. She said it was required under the emergency covenants, and I should have received the packet when I closed on the house. I did not receive any packet. She said ignorance is not an excuse, and handed me a new notice, then walked away before I could ask a single question. That was when I started recording every interaction. I have a former HOA board member named Greg who lives 2 streets over, and he recognized Melissa's pattern immediately when I told him what was happening. She does this every winter, he said. She picks 1 or 2 people and makes examples out of them to scare everyone else into compliance. Last year, she went after a guy for leaving his trash cans out during a snowstorm. The year before, that she fined someone for not shoveling within 6 hours of the last flake falling. She is not even current on her own dues, Greg said, but she acts like she owns the place. He offered to help me pull records and look for contradictions. I took him up on it. Now Melissa is telling me she is going to file a frivolous small claims filing meant to force me into a snow day courthouse, and she is going to do it tomorrow unless I agree to pay the fines and remove the table immediately. The HOA claims they will file a lien packet tomorrow, and I need to stop it today. I look at her, and I keep my voice calm. I did not mention my evidence yet, because I wanted her to repeat the story first. Melissa, I say, this is a card table with cocoa on it. I am not hosting an event. I am shoveling my driveway. She leans in close, and I can smell coffee on her breath. You signed the covenants, now you live the covenants, she says again. If you do not comply, I will make sure this goes on your permanent HOA record, and every future buyer will see it. I take a slow breath, and I do not move. I know what I have, and I know what she does not know I have, and I am not going to tip my hand yet. She turns and walks away, boots crunching in the slush, and I watch her get into her car and drive off. I fold up the table and take the thermoses inside. My hands are shaking. I sit down at my kitchen table and I pull out my phone and I call Greg. He answers on the second ring. She just threatened small claims and a lien, I say. Greg sighs. Of course she did. Did you record it? I did. Good. Send it to me. I am going to file a records request tonight, and we are going to see how many times she has edited her own complaints before submitting them to the board. I send him the audio file and I lean back in my chair and I stare at the ceiling. My head is pounding, and I have not slept more than 4 hours a night in 2 weeks, because every time Melissa shows up with a new notice, I wake up and I cannot get back to sleep. The stakes are real. My health is fragile, and the disruption is making everything worse. I need this to end. The next morning I wake up to an email from the management company. It says Melissa has submitted a formal complaint alleging that my driveway snow stakes caused plow damage during the last storm, and the HOA is holding me liable for the repair costs. The email includes a blurry photo of a plow truck with a dented blade, no readable text, and a paragraph explaining that the stakes were placed too close to the road and created a hazard. I stare at the email and I feel my chest tighten. I pulled the stakes 3 weeks ago. There are no stakes in my driveway. I call the management company and I get voicemail. I call Greg and he picks up immediately. They are saying I caused plow damage, I tell him. Greg laughs, but it is not a happy sound. Of course they are. That is the escalation I was waiting for. She is going to claim you are responsible for the damage, and then she is going to try to lien your property for the costs. I forwarded your records request to the property manager last night, and I already got a response. Melissa edited her complaint 3 times before she submitted it. The first version said the stakes were a visual nuisance. The second version said they were a trip hazard. The third version, the one she actually filed, said they caused plow damage. She is making it up as she goes. If you are enjoying this HOA chaos, hit that like button and subscribe so you do not miss the next story, where the neighbors fight back. I ask Greg what I should do. He tells me to file a written response with the management company, attach the timeline of when I removed the stakes, and request a formal hearing. He also tells me to keep recording everything and to not engage with Melissa directly anymore. I do exactly that. I write a detailed response, I attach photos showing my empty driveway with no stakes, and I request a hearing. I send it to the management company and I copy the entire board. Then I sit back and I wait. 2 days later, someone tampers with my snow stakes and Melissa blames me for the damage. Except I do not have snow stakes anymore. What I have is a neighbor who apparently put stakes back in my yard without asking, and Melissa sees them and assumes I reinstalled them in defiance. She shows up at my door with a clipboard and a camera and she starts taking pictures. I open the door and I tell her I did not put those stakes there. She does not believe me. "You are in violation again," she says. "You removed the stakes after the first notice, you were told not to reinstall them, and now you have reinstalled them. This is willful non-compliance and I am escalating this to the board for immediate action." I ask her who told her I reinstalled them. She says it does not matter, the stakes are there, and that is all the evidence she needs. I close the door and I call Greg again. "Someone put stakes in my yard and Melissa thinks I did it," I say. Greg groans. "That is the side complication. She is going to use it to justify more fines. You need to figure out who put them there, and you need to prove it was not you." I go outside and I look at the stakes. They are cheap plastic markers, the kind you can buy at any hardware store, and they are not even the same brand I used before. I pull out my phone and I start recording. I walk around my yard and I film every angle, showing that the stakes are new and that I have no reason to reinstall them. Then I see it. There is a boot print in the snow next to one of the stakes, and it is not my boot. It is smaller, narrower, and the tread pattern is different. I take a close-up photo of the print, and I measure it with my hand for scale. Then, I check my doorbell camera footage from the last 24 hours. At 6:47 yesterday morning, before sunrise, Melissa walked up my driveway, pulled a bundle of stakes out of her bag, and stuck them in the snow along the edge of my property. Then she took photos with her phone and walked away. I have the whole thing on video. Her face is clear, her coat is visible, and you can see her placing the stakes herself. I send the video to Greg immediately. He calls me back within 5 minutes. "This is it," he says. "This is the evidence you need. She is fabricating violations, and you have proof. You need to file a formal complaint with the board, and you need to demand an investigation. I also need you to send me that video so I can attach it to the records request response." The property manager is already scrambling because I cited 3 different versions of her complaint, and now they know she has been editing documents. This video is going to destroy her credibility. I send him the file, and I sit down and I write the longest, most detailed complaint I have ever written. I describe every interaction, every notice, every threat, and I attach the video showing Melissa placing the stakes herself after claiming she never came by. I send it to the management company, the board, and I copy Greg. Then, I wait. The response comes faster than I expected. The property manager calls me directly and asks if I can come in for a meeting. I say yes. She schedules it for the next afternoon, and she tells me Melissa will not be there. I ask why. She says the board has requested a separate meeting with Melissa to discuss the complaint and the video evidence. I feel a small flicker of hope. Maybe this is actually going to work. Maybe they are finally going to hold her accountable. I show up at the management office the next day, and the property manager, a woman named Sharon, meets me in the lobby. She looks tired. She leads me into a conference room, and she sits down across from me with a folder. "I appreciate you coming in," she says. "I have reviewed your complaint, and I have reviewed the video you submitted. I also reviewed the records request that Greg filed on your behalf, and I have some concerns about how this situation has been handled. She opens the folder, and she pulls out a printed timeline. This shows every complaint Melissa has filed against you, she says, and it shows every edit she made before submitting them. The original complaints were minor and mostly subjective. The later versions included specific allegations of property damage and safety hazards. That pattern is concerning. She pauses. The video you submitted shows Melissa placing stakes in your yard after you had already removed them, and then filing a complaint about those stakes. That is falsification of evidence, and it is a violation of the board's code of conduct. I ask her what happens next. Sharon takes a breath. The board is meeting with Melissa tonight to discuss her conduct. Based on the evidence, I expect they will vote to remove her from the architectural committee and possibly from the board entirely. I also expect they will rescind all fines and fees related to your case and issue a formal apology. I feel my shoulders drop. That is all I wanted. Sharon nods. I understand. I also want you to know that we are reviewing every complaint Melissa has filed over the last 2 years to see if there are other cases where she fabricated evidence or edited documents. If we find more, we may need to issue corrections to other homeowners as well. I thank her, and I leave. I feel lighter than I have in weeks. That night, Greg texts me. The board voted unanimously to remove Melissa from the architectural committee and from the board. They also voted to rescind all fines and fees related to your case, and to issue a written correction to every homeowner explaining that the winter enforcement policies were applied inconsistently and that Melissa exceeded her authority. He sends me a photo of the meeting minutes. No readable text visible, but I can see Melissa's name crossed out next to the committee assignment. I text him back. What about the lien threat? Greg responds immediately. Dead. The board voted to prohibit any lien filings related to your case, and they are reviewing the lien policy to make sure it cannot be abused like this again. I lean back on my couch and I close my eyes, and I feel the tension drain out of my body. It is over. But it is not over. 2 days later, Melissa shows up at the entrance to Silver Slush Court Association during the evening commute, and she tries to direct traffic like she is a cop. She is standing in the plow berm at the end of my driveway, wearing her purple coat and blue beanie, waving her arms at cars and yelling at people to slow down. A gate technician with a tool bag is walking up the street mid-argument, trying to get her to move so he can access the call box. Melissa ignores him. She is screaming at a driver who honked at her, telling him he is violating the neighborhood speed limit and she is going to report him to the board. The driver yells back that she is not a cop and she needs to get out of the road. I am standing in my driveway watching this unfold, and I pull out my phone and I start recording again. This is too good to miss. The gate technician finally reaches Melissa and he tells her she is blocking access to the call box and creating a safety hazard. Melissa spins around and she jabs her finger at him. I am the architectural committee chair and I have the authority to manage traffic during snow emergencies, she yells. The technician shakes his head. No, you do not, he says. I just got off the phone with your management company and they told me you were removed from the committee 2 days ago. You do not have any authority here. Melissa freezes. Her face goes white, then red, then white again. She opens her mouth to respond and then her phone rings. She pulls it out of her crossbody bag and she looks at the screen and her expression changes. She answers it and she starts yelling into the phone. I do not care what the board said. I am still a homeowner and I have the right to enforce the covenants. There is a pause, and then she yells louder. You cannot do this to me. I have been on this board for 6 years, and I have done more for this neighborhood than anyone. Another pause. Her hand is shaking. "Fine," she says. "Fine. You want to do this? We will do this." She hangs up and she shoves the phone back in her bag, and she looks around like she is trying to figure out what to do next. Then her phone dies mid-rant, and she freezes in place, staring at the black screen like it just betrayed her. The gate technician steps around her and gets to the call box. I stop recording and I go back inside. The next morning, I get an email from Sharon. It is a formal apology letter from the board, addressed to me and copied to every homeowner in Silver Slush Court Association. The letter explains that Melissa Martinez exceeded her authority as architectural committee chair, filed complaints that were later found to be inaccurate or fabricated, and created a hostile environment for multiple homeowners. The board has voted to remove her from all committee assignments and to rescind all fines and fees related to cases where evidence was found to be unreliable. The letter also announces that the HOA is revising the winter enforcement policies to ensure more consistent and fair application, and that all homeowners who received notices from Melissa in the last 2 years will be contacted individually to review their cases. I forward the email to Greg. He replies with a thumbs-up emoji and a single sentence. "You won. But I am not done. I still have the trump card I have been holding. I did not mention my evidence yet, because I wanted her to repeat the story first. Now I am ready to use it." I pull up the audio clip I recorded 3 weeks ago, the one where Melissa admits it is personal and she wants to make an example of me. In the recording, she is standing in my driveway at night, and she is talking to another board member on speakerphone. "I do not care if his violations are minor," she says. "I want him to understand that when you move into Silver Slush Court, you follow the rules or you suffer the consequences. I am making an example out of him so everyone else knows I am serious." The other board member tries to talk her down, but Melissa cuts him off. "He is a troublemaker, and I am going to fine him until he moves out or falls in line." I have the whole conversation saved. I have been sitting on it because I wanted to see how far she would go, and I wanted to make sure I had enough evidence to prove a pattern. Now I have everything I need. I email the audio clip to Sharon and I include a 2-sentence explanation. This recording was made on my property with my knowledge during a conversation Melissa had on speakerphone. It demonstrates that her enforcement actions were motivated by personal animus rather than legitimate covenant violations. Then I drop it in a calm, 2-sentence statement, then let the silence do the damage. I do not add anything else. I do not editorialize. I just send it, and I wait. Sharon calls me an hour later. Her voice is tight. "I have listened to the recording," she says. "This changes everything. The board is going to hold an emergency meeting tonight, and I expect they will vote to refer this matter to an attorney. Melissa may face legal consequences for harassment and abuse of authority. I also want you to know that we are going to issue a second correction letter to all homeowners, and we are going to include a summary of the findings from the records review. The pattern of behavior you documented is consistent with what we found in other cases, and we believe multiple homeowners were targeted unfairly." I thank her, and I hang up. That night, the board holds the emergency meeting. Greg texts me updates in real time. Melissa showed up and tried to defend herself, he says. She claimed the recording was taken out of context and that she was just trying to enforce the rules. The board did not buy it. They voted to refer the matter to the HOA attorney and to prohibit Melissa from serving on any committee or board position for the next 5 years. They also voted to refund all snow-related fines and fees to every homeowner who was cited under the winter emergency policies, and to issue a formal apology to everyone affected. Greg sends me a photo of the vote tally, No readable text, but I can see a row of check marks next to the refund line. It is unanimous. The next week, I get a check in the mail from the HOA. It is a refund for every fine I paid, plus interest. The letter that comes with it explains that the board has completed its review of Melissa's enforcement actions and determined that her complaints were unfounded, with evidence cited. I also get a call from Sharon. She tells me that a records request that exposes contradictions and edits in Melissa's complaint history has been completed, and that several other homeowners are also receiving refunds. The board is working on new policies to prevent this kind of abuse in the future, and they are considering term limits for committee chairs. I thank her and I tell her I appreciate the transparency. She says she is sorry it took so long to address the problem, and she hopes I will stay in the neighborhood. I tell her I will. 2 weeks later, I am shoveling my driveway again, and I see Melissa drive past. She does not look at me. She does not stop. She just keeps driving, her face set in a tight line, her hands gripping the wheel. I wave at her anyway. She does not wave back. I finish shoveling, and I set up my folding table again, and I put out 2 thermoses of cocoa. 3 neighbors stop by and thank me. One of them tells me he heard what happened with Melissa, and he is glad someone finally stood up to her. Another tells me she got a refund check too, and she could not believe the board actually held Melissa accountable. The third neighbor just takes a cup of cocoa and nods at me, and that is enough. I pack up the table when the sun goes down and I go inside, and I sleep better than I have in months. A month later, the HOA holds its annual meeting. I show up because I want to see what happens. The room is packed. Sharon stands at the front, and she presents the new winter enforcement policies. They are clear, consistent, and fair. They include a requirement that all complaints must be reviewed by at least 2 board members before any fines are issued. And they include a formal appeals process for homeowners who believe they were cited unfairly. The board also announces that they are dissolving the architectural committee temporarily and restructuring it with new members who will be elected by the homeowners rather than appointed by the board. Melissa is sitting in the back row, arms crossed, face blank. When the vote comes, the new policies pass unanimously. Melissa does not vote. She just stands up and walks out. No one stops her. No one says anything. She is done. After the meeting, Greg finds me in the lobby. "You did it," he says. "You took her down, and you did it the right way. You documented everything. You filed the right complaints. You used the system, and you won." I shake his hand and I thank him for his help. He waves it off. "I have been waiting for someone to stand up to her for years," he says. "I am just glad it finally happened." We walk out together and I get in my car and I drive home. The neighborhood looks different now. The snow is still there. The cold is still there. But the weight is gone. The fear is gone. The constant worry that Melissa is going to show up with another notice, another fine, another threat, that is gone too. I park in my driveway, and I look at my house, and I realize I can finally relax. The HOA sends out the final correction letter 2 weeks later. It goes to every homeowner in Silver Slush Court Association, and it includes a full summary of the investigation into Melissa's conduct. The letter explains that the HOA refunds the snow-related fines and fees to all affected homeowners, and it includes a breakdown of the new enforcement policies and the revised appeals process. The letter also includes a note from the board president apologizing for the failure to address the problem sooner and committing to more transparent and accountable governance going forward. I read the letter twice and I file it in my records box. Then I delete all the recordings I made, except for the one where Melissa admits it is personal. That one I keep, just in case. You never know when you might need proof that someone crossed the line, and I am not going to let my guard down completely. Not yet. Spring comes early that year. The snow melts faster than usual, and by the end of March, the neighborhood is green again. I see Melissa a few times at the grocery store, at the gas station, around town. She never acknowledges me. She never says hello. She just pretends I do not exist, and I am fine with that. I do not need her apology. I do not need her to admit she was wrong. I just need her to leave me alone. And she does. The new architectural committee is elected in April, and the new members are reasonable, fair, and transparent. They send out a survey asking homeowners what they want to see improved, and they actually read the responses. It is a small thing, but it makes a difference. People start attending board meetings again. People start volunteering for committees. The neighborhood feels like a community instead of a battleground, and that is worth more than any refund check. I run into Greg at the neighborhood coffee shop in May, and he tells me Melissa moved out. She sold her house and left, he says. I heard she moved to a different HOA across town. I almost feel bad for them. I laugh and I shake my head. They will figure it out, I say. Greg grins. Yeah, they will. He buys me a coffee, and we sit outside and we talk about the new board, the new policies, and the new energy in the neighborhood. It feels good. It feels normal. It feels like what an HOA should be, a group of people working together to maintain a nice place to live, instead of a power trip for one angry person with a clipboard and a vendetta. I keep the car key fob I clenched in my fist during that first confrontation. I keep it on my desk as a reminder that I stood my ground, that I documented everything, and that I won. Not because I was smarter or tougher or louder, but because I was patient, and I followed the process, and I let the evidence speak for itself. That is the lesson I take away from this whole mess. When someone abuses their power, you do not have to fight them with the same tactics. You just have to outlast them, document their mistakes, and let the system catch up. It takes longer, it is frustrating, and it is exhausting, but it works. And when it works, it feels better than any petty revenge ever could. The following winter, the HOA handles snow enforcement completely differently. The new committee sends out clear guidelines in October, before the first storm. They hold a town hall meeting to answer questions. They create an online portal where homeowners can submit maintenance logs and photos to show compliance, and they respond to inquiries within 24 hours instead of weeks. When the first big storm hits in December, I shovel my driveway, I set up my folding table, and I put out cocoa. No one says a word. No one files a complaint. No one threatens me with fines or liens or small claims court. I get a text from one of the new committee members thanking me for being a good neighbor and offering to help if I need anything. It is such a small gesture, but it means everything. It means the culture has changed. It means the fear is gone. It means we won. I am still a community event coordinator at the rec center, and I still live in Silver Slush Court Association. My health is better now that I am sleeping through the night again. The stress is gone. The constant vigilance is gone. I can park my car in my driveway without worrying that someone is going to call a tow truck. I can shovel my walk without worrying that someone is going to measure the snow depth and cite me for non-compliance. I can live my life without feeling like I am under surveillance 24 hours a day, and that freedom is priceless. I paid for it with months of documentation, sleepless nights, and stress headaches, but I paid for it, and now it is mine. No one can take it away. Not Melissa, not the board, not anyone. I earned it, and I am keeping it. The final piece of the story comes in February, almost a year after the whole mess started. I get a letter in the mail from the HOA attorney. It is a settlement offer related to a class action complaint filed by several homeowners who were targeted by Melissa during her tenure on the board. The letter explains that the HOA has agreed to settle the complaint and issue additional refunds to affected homeowners, and it includes a check for my share of the settlement. The amount is small, a few $100s, but it is the principle that matters. The letter also includes a statement from the board acknowledging that the previous enforcement practices were inconsistent, unfair, and created a hostile environment, and committing to ongoing training and oversight to prevent similar issues in the future. I cash the check and I file the letter with the rest of my records. Then I close the box and I put it on the shelf. It is over. Really, truly over. I learned a lot from this experience. I learned that HOAs can be a force for good when they are run by people who care about the community instead of people who care about control. I learned that documentation is everything, that patience is a weapon, and that the truth always wins in the end, even when it takes longer than you want. I learned that you do not have to be loud or aggressive to stand up for yourself. You just have to be consistent, thorough, and willing to follow through. And I learned that karma is real, even if it does not always show up on your schedule. Melissa tried to destroy me over a folding table and 2 thermoses of cocoa, and in the end, she destroyed herself. Her phone died mid-rant and she froze in place, her authority evaporated, her credibility shattered, and her reign of terror over. The HOA refunded the snow-related fines and fees, my complaint was ruled unfounded with evidence cited, and a records request that exposed contradictions and edits in her enforcement history brought the whole house of cards down. I did not have to do anything except tell the truth and let her own actions speak for themselves. That is the most satisfying victory of all. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next HOA story.